So I think most of us know the song by the Byrds that goes, to everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. Okay, I know I didn't sing that right. I know I didn't sing it like the 1960s pop band rocked it out, but you know what? I completely agree with the song's message. I do believe that there is a time and a purpose for everything under heaven. And I think each one of us have a special purpose. Now, if that's the case, are you going to be ready to step up to your purpose when life shines a spotlight on you? Let me tell you about a man who had a great big purpose. About 100 years ago, Max J. Barnaby of the Flathead Nation was preparing to deliver a speech to the League of Nations. He was seeking collaboration over policy abuses and abuses of his people. Now, he was the tribal council president, and when I say tribal council president, I mean he was elected, not appointed, elected by his people to represent their collective concerns, and not just his own nation, but 9 distinct nations. Now, let me back it up a little and tell you a little bit more about Max J. Barnaby, because he's just a regular guy, right? So Max J. Barnaby was born in the late 1800s, and he went through the process of assimilation, like most Native American children. Now, some of you may or may not know what that means. It means you're sent off to boarding school, separated from your family, you're stripped of your heritage, your culture, your language, your religion, and everything that makes you Native American. And you're Americanized, which is ironic. Now, from there, if you're a young man, you went off and you learned field and labor in secondary school. When I say field and labor, I mean you learn to be a farmer, right? You're Americanized further, or Europeanized, however you want to look at it. But he didn't stop there. He didn't stop at that secondary education. He went on to study economics and accounting at the Haskell Institute, which was a specific institute for Native American men who wanted to go on with their studies. Now, he must have been destined for leadership and public speaking because he was the commencement speaker at his graduation ceremony. Now, Max, when he graduated, like most college students, he got married, started his family. But then when called upon, when destiny called him to step up and serve his country in World War I, he enlisted. He was proud. You see, even if his country didn't recognize him as a true and equal citizen, I am absolutely certain that without a doubt, he believed that he belonged to the United States. Now, he was injured in the war, and when he came back home, his political career really got started. Now, I'm certain he was very proud of not only his Native American heritage, but his United States service, United States Marine Service, because he was always wearing his uniform. Now, he served at tribal council meetings. He acted as an interpreter and a translator, particularly where it was very important for the tribal leaders that he was representing to be represented honestly and to be understood. And he wanted them to be able to understand what was going on so that they wouldn't be further disenfranchised by the process. Now, as he became well known, he was elected in 1920 as that tribal council president. He went to Washington several times on behalf of the tribal council. He went to Congress. He went to congressional hearings not only in Washington, but in Montana regarding the political abuses, the treaty breaches that had occurred there. Now, if you think that he was treated equally, or that he had risen to some point where he might have been respected as a leader, as a politician, you'd be mistaken. In fact, many times as he would go and speak, he was treated as if he was on trial. They questioned the legitimacy of his role as tribal council president, saying, well, you weren't appointed by the Indian Bureau. You know, this election isn't real. Well, the Indian Bureau was under the control of the United States government, so how is that legitimate? Definitely a conflict of interest. Well, Max had had enough. And by 1927, he was preparing to bring the concerns that he had brought over and over and over again to Congress and other political arenas. to the international community. He wanted to get the entire world involved. Now, he must have been effective at ruffling feathers, and he must have seemed like a threat, because on March 27th, 1927, he was taken out. And when I say taken out, I mean, according to his family, he was brutally beaten and then shot. And that was the end of his political work. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why'd you tell us this story about this great Native American hero that represented his people and then was shot? Like, how is that a good story? How is that inspiring? Well, hold on. I have a couple more minutes, so let me tell you another story. So last year, my institution chose me to serve as head delegate to our Model United Nations team. Now, I was pretty amped about this. I was like super honored, but I was also a little bit terrified. Well, a lot terrified, because that's a big burden, and I already had kind of a large course load, and I'm thinking, how am I going to do this and do it well? But I thought, you know what, this is an amazing thing to be able to do. I'm going to seize it. I'm going to step up to it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to give it all that I've got. So for the better part of 2 semesters, along with my delegates, we prepared for this conference, this competition. We wrote speeches. We wrote position papers. We practiced our game. We felt pretty confident as we moved closer and closer to the competition. By the time March rolled around, we were thinking, okay, this isn't so scary. I mean, you know, we're going to compete against, Ivy League schools and things like that. This is okay. We've got a good game. It's going to be good. 2 weeks before the competition, there's this tiny little adjustment to the schedule. So instead of doing our regular voting at the United Nations General Assembly Hall, which is kind of like this really great big deal that we love to do as delegates, it's like a prize, right? To be able to go to the UN and see the place where stuff happens. There's this change. There's going to be speeches instead. Speeches, okay. But not just any speeches. Each institution is to pick one student, one delegate, to give a speech on the sustainable development goal that they believed the United Nations need to focus on most. So my institution chose me to do that. Okay, so now not only do I have a little bit of pressure to perform as a head delegate, I'm going to go give a speech at the United Nations. That's not that big of a deal, right? Yeah, I was a little bit scared. But thankfully I have the best speech professor ever in the world, and he helped me put together an amazing speech for which I had very little time to try to memorize. So yeah. Anyway, fast forward 2 weeks. I'm sitting in my hotel room with my delegates and my speech professor, and we're going over the speech again and again and again and again and again, and we're timing it, and I'm always just a second under, a second over. I'm how am I going to get this right? It's so important. What I have to say is so important. There's this tiny little time slot to say it in, but I got to get it right. Fast forward, I'm at the United Nations in the General Assembly Hall, and I don't know if you guys have seen this room, but it's scary. It is huge, and it's intimidating. And I'm just okay, so I'm going to go up there and say what? But I'm no, I'm just going to calm down and relax. I'm going to do it. I've got this great big purpose to fulfill, and I've got to get it right. So I'm sitting there with all the other delegates who are also freaking out, and we're trying to calm each other down. And I'm thinking, why am I so scared? I have practiced. I know what I need to say. Could be the 1,500 or so people in the room. Could have been that. Could have been that my speech, is going to be recorded for all posterity. Could have been that too. But I think more importantly, it was what I had to say. It was so important. I had to get it right. It meant so much. So fast forward, my name is called. And I'm just really? Did they call my, maybe they didn't. No, they called my name. It was time to walk up there, actually. As I walked, I could not feel my legs, and I thought, oh dear God, please don't let me trip and faceplant on the stage. That will be terrible. I feel like my head's going to fall off and roll down. But somehow or another, I make it up to the stage and to the podium, gracefully, I think. I set my speech card down, And I just look out at the sea of faces. And I take in the moment. And then I do it. I give my speech. And this is what I said. In 1927, my great-grandfather, Max J. Barnaby, of the Tribal Council presiding over 9 tribal nations, was preparing to deliver a speech to the League of Nations, seeking collaboration, echoing the demands of Sustainable Development Goal 16. Tragically, his untimely death meant he was never able to deliver that speech. Now I stand here today at the United Nations in the General Assembly Hall in his honor. My plea is that we never forget the struggle we all face towards peace, justice, and inclusive institutions for all. I did it. I gave my speech. But it wasn't just my speech. It was a speech that was in the works 100 years ago. My purpose was now linked with my great-grandfather's purpose. I was able to complete the mission that he had begun. Providence had given me this great chance to correct a wrong and to give voice to so many, not just my great-grandfather, but so many. Now his words, his plea, is resounding in World Assembly halls and forums just like this. And it goes on. The work goes on. So let me sum it up like this. We all have important contributions to make to humanity. Things that we need to do. You and only you can be you. You each have important contributions to make. You each have gifts, talents, personal histories, experiences, things that make you just the right person to fulfill your purpose. So when it's your turn to step up, don't be afraid. Step up and fulfill your purpose under heaven. Thank you.